Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So now we are going to start our third chapter, which is consumer behavior. We have gone through the elasticity of demand, and we have discussed three types of elasticities: income elasticity, price elasticity, and cross price elasticity. And I hope that you have gone through the slides as well. So now we are going to start the consumer behavior, in which we are interested to identify that how to derive a demand curve. So in Econ 100 we have made this for example demand curve, and we are saying that every point here is showing something else. Okay, it is not just showing the relationship of price with the quantity demanded. ठीक है, डिमांड कर्व के अंदर क्या था, the relationship of price with the quantity demanded. So I'm saying that every point on this demand curve is just not showing you the relationship of price with the quantity, but there exists a very you can say there are many insights through which you can identify that how these points are derived. Okay, so first of all, therefore, we will start our discussion from the consumer preferences. Okay, and then we will discuss the budget constraints, and eventually we will discuss the consumer choice. So just a glimpse of what I have said about these points is that these points, all of these points on the demand curve, are the consumer choices, which are derived. The consumer choices are derived from the concepts of consumer preferences and budget constraints. Okay, so first of all, we are going to discuss the consumer preference, and everything relevant to consumer preference and budget constraint will be discussed. So first of all, you should know about the theory of consumer behavior, which is a description of how consumers allocate incomes among different goods and services to maximize their well-being. So again, this is the same definition I think that you have also seen for economics, that to allocate resources, optimally allocate the resources. So likewise is the case here, that there is an income which a consumer is facing. Okay, he is having an income, and therefore that particular income is a scarce resource for him. ठीक है, वो उसके लिए एक ऐसा resource है which is limited. So what he wants to do is to optimally allocate his income among different goods and services, so that he can maximize his benefit, and he can maximize his well-being. So likewise the definition, so the definition of theory of consumer behavior is much you can say similar with the definition of economics, that we have scarce resources and we have to optimally allocate them. So if you are a consumer, the scarce resources which you are facing is income. Okay, that income should be allocated among different goods and services optimally in order to maximize the well-being of the consumer. So before starting to discuss or in this theory of consumer behavior, the first thing which we are going to discuss is the consumer preferences, which is a practical way to describe the reason people might prefer one good to another. So basically there is an idea that there are different consumer baskets. ठीक है, कंज्यूमर बास्केट्स हैं, कंज्यूमर की आप ट्रॉलीज लेते हैं मुख्तलिफ मॉल्स के अंदर, सो मुख्तलिफ सुपर मार्केट्स के अंदर, तो आप इस तरह समझें कि देर आर डिफरेंट बास्केट्स and there are different commodities within these baskets. There are different commodities, different units of goods and services within this consumer basket. ठीक है, इस कंज्यूमर बास्केट के अंदर जूते भी आ सकते हैं और कपड़े भी आ सकते हैं, फूड भी आ सकता है. Every such thing which a consumer might be buying, ठीक है, can come under this consumer basket. So we are saying that it is a practical way to describe the reason. Now we are going to discuss the reason that why people prefer one good to the other, why they are preferring, for example, this particular consumer basket to this one, and why they are preferring this consumer basket to this one, or either they are indifferent between them or not. कि जी मैं ये ले लूं या ये ले लूं. Every such consumer basket is giving me equal preference. So all of this discussion will be or all of these concepts will be discussed under consumer preferences. The next thing which we have to discuss in the consumer behavior is budget constraint, the income level or the restriction of the income the consumers are facing. ठीक है, ये तो आसान है. But after combining the consumer preferences with the budget constraint, we come up with another concept, which is the consumer choices, or you can say consumer choices are derived from the budget constraint, the concept of consumer preferences and budget constraint. So given their preferences, okay, given the preferences of the consumer and limited income, okay, now limited income is budget constraint, okay, and given their preferences, consumer preference. So after combining both the concepts of consumer preference and limited resources, or you can say budget constraint, Understanding consumer choice will help us understand demand, that is, how the quantity of a good that consumers choose to purchase depends on its price. This is definition of demand. So again, we are going to combine the concepts of consumer preferences with the budget constraint in order to identify that what is the consumer choice. And through consumer choice, we will be able to understand the insights of demand curve. Yeah. So, starting from the consumer preference, first you want to think about a market basket. Okay, and in this market basket, we are saying that there are different specific quantities of one or more goods. So here we have different market baskets A, B, D, E, G, H. These all are different market baskets in which you are looking at different units of food and different units of clothing. Okay, so for example, in market basket A, we are looking that there are 20 units of food and 30 units of clothing. In market basket B, 10 units of food and you can say 50 units of clothing. So here there are different market baskets. Okay, and likewise is the case with D, E, G, and H. And from these market baskets, any one should be given preference. ठीक है या हम ये देखेंगे कि how a consumer is going to make a preference while choosing any of these baskets. तो वैसे ही हम वैसे डिस्कशन करते हैं इसमें कि how we can compare different market baskets from each other. So if you want to compare between A and B, ठीक है A के अंदर he is getting 20 units of food and 30 units of clothing. In B he is getting 10 units of food. Yes, the number of units of food are less in market basket B, but there are 20 more units of clothing. Okay, so the consumer may be choosing A or maybe he will be choosing B. Okay, he may be indifferent between choosing these two. ठीक है अब D की तरफ आते हैं. There is another market basket D, and we are looking that D has 40 units of food which is 20 more than A. ठीक है make a comparison between D and A now. ठीक है A को आप mark as a reference रखें and compare every market basket with A. So in case of market basket D, we are looking that there are 40 units of food which is 20 more, as compared to A. But in the clothing section, we are looking that there is a decline of 10 units of clothing. Okay, again, these are different combinations. ठीक है और among these combinations A, B and D, ठीक है without having any additional information, we cannot know that whether the consumer will be preferring an A or B or D. कि जी कंज्यूमर ने ए को प्रेफर करना है बी को करना है डी को करना है वी कैन नॉट गेट दिस इंफॉर्मेशन फ्रॉम द गिवन यूनिट्स ऑफ food and clothing, because if one thing is sacrificed, for example 10 units of food are being sacrificed, still 20 more units of clothing is a plus point here in market basket B. Whereas in market basket D, what is happening that we are having more units of food, 20 more units of food, but yes, we are sacrificing 10 units of clothing. Okay, so again, without any additional information, we cannot choose any of the market basket A, B, and D. Okay, if we are comparing all of these market baskets with A. Now come to market basket E. Okay, and we compare market basket E with market basket A. Okay, here we are looking that there are 10 more units of food, and in the clothing section there are 10 more units of clothing. तो यहाँ पर तो हम आंखें बंद करके कह सकते हैं कि if a consumer wants to choose between A and B, if the consumer wants to choose between A and E, ठीक है he will be choosing E. Why? Because there are 10 more units of food, ठीक है 30 units हैं और 10 more units of clothing है which is 40. ठीक है so in choosing between A and E, we certainly know that the consumer will be choosing E. E को choose करेगा. Why? There because more is good than less. ठीक है more is better than less. ठीक है and a rational consumer always chooses that market basket in which he can maximize his utility, maximize his satisfaction. So now coming to market basket G, and we are going to compare market basket G with market basket A, and we are looking that there are 10 less units of food and 10 less units of clothing, which means that if the consumer wants to give a preference between A and G, he will be certainly giving a preference to A. ठीक है A को वो लाजमी प्रेफर करेगा. ठीक है बात समझ में आ रही है. He will not give any preference to G. Why? Because both units of food and units of cloth are less than market basket A. अच्छा जी. The next or the last market basket is H, in which we are looking, if we want to compare it with a market basket A, we are seeing that there are 10 less units of food and 10 more units of clothing. Again, we cannot compare it with A. We cannot it with A because we are having less units of food, but we are having more units of clothing. But yes, we can compare it with B. We can compare it with B. So if we want to compare B, we can look at the units of food, which is 10 again. ठीक है, कोई sacrifice यहाँ पर नहीं हो रहा और ना कोई benefit है. But in terms of units of clothing, we are looking that the units of clothing are less in market basket H as compared to market basket B. ठीक है. So again, if you want to make a summarize or we want to summarize this discussion, we may say that if the consumer wants to prefer between A and E, he will be giving preference. He will be certainly giving preference to E. He can, if the consumer wants to choose between A and G, he will be giving preference to A. If the consumer wants to prefer between A, B, and D, ठीक है, he will become indifferent. He cannot choose any one of these. ठीक है, किसी एक को वो चूज नहीं कर पा रहा क्योंकि कुछ चीजें एक के अंदर कम है तो दूसरे के अंदर ज्यादा है. अगर एक के अंदर ज्यादा है तो दूसरे के अंदर कम है. ठीक है. And if we want to choose between H and A, if we want to compare, again he will be indifferent. But if we compare with B, ठीक है, H को हम B के साथ compare करें, then we will certainly prefer market basket B because we have 10 more units of clothing, whereas the units of food are equal in both of the market baskets. Okay, so now we are going to make you can say a graph, but before discussing and making a graph, we are going to assume some assumptions before discussing any model in economics. Okay, to explain the theory of consumer behavior, we will ask whether consumers prefer one market to the market basket to the other. So there are some basic assumptions which you want to take under account. The first assumption of consumer theory is completeness. Okay? Completeness means that the preference are assumed to be complete, which means that the consumer is able to rank between different market baskets. Okay? So for example, here in our case, okay, we are saying for any two market baskets A and B, okay, कोई भी अगर market basket हो A and B, a consumer either he will be able to prefer between A, ठीक है, to B, or he may be able to prefer B to A, or he may be indifferent between the two, which is A and B. ठीक है, why? Because every market basket A and B is showing a complete information of the utility which he can gain from the consumer baskets. ठीक है, तो जब ये completeness हम बोलते हैं, it means के it shows a complete information of preferences, ठीक है, between the market baskets, ठीक है, so that he can rank between different market baskets. ठीक है, वो complete है, वो इस एतबार से complete है कि the consumer also knows the actual benefit of those market baskets, so he is able to rank between all the possible baskets. So when we are saying indifferent between the two, तो हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि by indifferent we mean that a person will be equally satisfied with either basket, either he is choosing A or B. ठीक है, यहाँ पर इसको अगर हम summarize करें तो ये कहा जा रहा है कि if there are two market baskets A and B, then the preferences are assumed to be complete in such a sense that he can rank between A and B. Either he will be giving preference to A, ठीक है, against B, or he will be giving preference to B against A, or he may be indifferent between choosing A and B. ठीक है, ये सब situations इसके अंदर हो सकती हैं. So the next assumption regarding the consumer preference or the theory of consumer behavior is transitivity. So here we are saying that preferences are transitive. So transitivity means that if a consumer prefers basket A to basket B and basket B to basket C, then the consumer also prefers A to C. So this is transitivity is normally regarded as necessary for consumer consistency as well. So for example, we are saying, in other words, we are saying in terms of cars, for example, we are saying that we have Honda Civic, ठीक है, and we are giving preference, Honda Civic है हमारे पास, and we are giving preference to Honda Civic against Toyota Corolla. ठीक है, आप Corolla के, if you want to choose between Toyota Corolla and Honda Civic, you are going to choose Honda Civic. Why? Because you are giving preference to Honda Civic. ठीक है, and if you want to choose, for example, between Toyota Corolla and WagonR, ठीक है, and WagonR, then you will certainly give preference to Toyota Corolla. ठीक है, if this is what you have or what your preferences look like, ठीक है, and you are ranking different market baskets, or you can say you are ranking different cars here, And for example, this is the case that you are giving preference to Honda Civic against Toyota Corolla, and then you are giving preference to Toyota Corolla against Wagoner. Then, in other words, we can say that you are giving preference to Honda Civic, ठीक है, against Wagoner. ठीक है, if we drop Toyota Corolla from between, तो आप दूसरे अल्फाज में ये भी कह रहे हैं कि you are giving preference to Honda Civic against Wagoner. ठीक है. So this is a property of, or you can say an assumption of transitivity, okay, which means that the preference are positive. The third assumption here, which we are talking about, is more is better than less. Okay, so every such basket which is giving or having more units of a good, okay, will be giving more will be given more preference, and it will be desirable for the consumer, and it is very easy to understand. So after discussing three assumptions of the consumer behavior, the next thing which we have to discuss is to see and to plot all the points of this particular table, table 3.1, in a graph, and we will see that how a graph is made of all the market baskets when we are talking about different units of food and units of clothing. Okay, so the graph which is made here, okay, we are talking about A now. Again, we have two shaded areas, the blue one and the pink one, and we will see that how you can say, or here it is written that that this blue shaded area is the area which is or every such point which will be allocated here in this particular area will be given less preference, and every such point which will be plotted in this particular area will be this means that this particular commodity is being given preference against A. So this is less preferable area and this is more preferable area against point A, and how this works is we are going to discuss after plotting all the points. So here for example we have G, और अगर आपको याद हो तो टेबल में आपने हमने ये बात की थी कि against A and A will be given preference, and against A and E will be given preference. Why? Because there is a clear sign here that G point is giving you, or it is a market basket which is giving you 20 units of clothing and 10 units of food. Okay, 10 units of food and 20 units of clothing. But what is happening to point A? A is giving you 20 units of food and 30 units of clothing, which is clearly preferable than point G. And then point E is again clearly preferable than A. Why? Because it is giving you 10 more units of clothing and 10 more units of food. Okay, so therefore we are going to prefer E against A, and if we have to compare between A and G, then we will be giving preference to A. Okay, now we have different other points as well. So here we are looking that we have point B here, which is giving us 50 units of clothing and 10 units of food. And likewise, we have point D here, which is giving us 20 units of clothing and 40 units of food. Okay, and point H also we have there, which is giving us almost 40 units of clothing and 10 units of food. So we have plotted all the information which was available in the table. So now we are going to discuss some other things as well. ठीक है, और या इसी को अगर हम देख लें यहाँ पर, then you can see that point E again is more preferable than A. Point G is more preferable than or is less preferable than A. ठीक है, among B and H, ठीक है, H is less preferable against B. But if you want to compare between B, A and D, if we want to compare between B, A and D, okay, we cannot confirmly say about a consumer that he will be giving preference to D or A to B. Why? Because there are different, you can say, there is different information, okay, and without additional information we cannot choose between B, A and D. So therefore we are going to introduce another concept here, okay, and that particular concept is the indifference curve. So it is a curve which represents all combinations of market baskets that provide a consumer with the same level of satisfaction. It is a curve which represents all combinations of market baskets that provide a consumer with the same level of satisfaction. So we are saying that here in this case point B and point A and point D, all of these 3 points are representing all combination of market baskets. These are different combinations of market baskets which is providing a consumer the same level of satisfaction, because he cannot choose among these consumer baskets, which is B, A and D. So if we are going to join these points now, B, A and D, in order to make an indifference curve. Okay. So this is an indifference curve, okay, which is showing that we cannot choose, or the consumer cannot choose between A, B and D. ठीक है, he is indifferent between all of these points. इनके दरमियान में वो क्या है, indifferent है, because every bundle here, every market basket is giving him equal satisfaction. Okay, so we are going to plot all the points, all other points as well, and we will see that how all of these are compared with each other. तो बाकी को तो हमने compare कर दिया था, but point B, A, and D were the points where in which the consumer was you can say indifferent. So we have made this curve, which is the indifference curve. Again, indifference curve. The definition of indifference curve is that it is showing all or every point on this indifference curve is showing that the consumer is equally satisfied with all of these bundles. So we have not included H in it. Why? Because the consumer is not equally satisfied with B and H. अगर हम इस तरह की curve बनाते जिसके अंदर हम H को include करते, ठीक है, we would not be able to make this indifference curve. Why? Because among B and H he will be giving preference to B, because the consumer is not equally satisfied with the market basket, you can say B and H.